Hello and welcome to The Awakening. This is a place for us to come together, to learn, to grow, and to celebrate the power and beauty of Black womanhood. I'm your host, Cheri Dani, and I am so incredibly honored to be on this journey with you. You see, for far too long, the stories of Black women, their struggles, their triumphs, their very existence, have been relegated to the margins of history. But not here, not anymore. On this channel, we're shining a light on the remarkable contributions of Black women throughout history and today. We're going to laugh together, we're going to cry together, and most importantly, we're going to uplift and empower one another. Because when Black women rise, we lift up our families, our communities, our world. So if you're ready to be inspired, to be challenged, to be moved, then hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join me on this incredible journey. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment. Top 16 Black women activists you should know. Number 16, Rosa Page, Black Femicide Coalition. Black femicide is a term coined by Rosa Page, an Arkansas-based nurse and the founder of Black Femicide US, which is a movement to bring awareness to the disproportionate number of murders of Black women and girls. Number 15, Brenda Eichelberger, Black feminist Brenda Eichelberger, Women's March, circa 1976. Brenda Eichelberger, National Alliance of Black Feminists Papers. Brenda Eichelberger, 1939 to 2017, decided to respond to an increase in local, national, and international Black feminist struggle by organizing the National Alliance of Black Feminists in summer 1975. A change she enacted from her previous organization, the National Association of Black Feminists, was to be more inclusive in membership. Specifically, Eichelberger included Black men and white women who were previously excluded from the National Association of Black Feminists. Eichelberger served as the National Alliance of Black Feminists' first executive director, and the organization was open to everyone to fight for causes of Black feminism. The organization opened its national offices in May 1976 at 202 South State Street in Chicago, Illinois. Open to any Black woman interested in advancing the cause of Black feminism, the National Alliance of Black Feminists was dedicated to achieving full equality for Black women in America. Number 14, Bell Hooks, Gloria Jean Watkins, September 25, 1952, December 15, 2021, better known by her pen name Bell Hooks, was an American author, theorist, educator, and social critic who was a distinguished professor in residence at Berea College. She was best known for her writings on race, feminism, and class. She used the lowercase spelling of her name to decenter herself and draw attention to her work instead. The focus of Hooks' writing was to explore the intersectionality of race, capitalism, and gender, and what she described as their ability to produce and perpetuate systems of oppression and class domination. She published around 40 books, including works that range from essays, poetry, and children's books. She published numerous scholarly articles, appeared in documentary films, and participated in public lectures. Her work addressed love, race, social class, gender, art, history, sexuality, mass media, and feminism. In Feminist Theory, From Margin to Center, 1984, Hooks develops a critique of white feminist racism in second-wave feminism, which she argued undermined the possibility of feminist solidarity across racial lines. In 2020, during the George Floyd protests, there was a resurgence of interest in Hooks' work on racism, feminism, and capitalism. Number 13, Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw. Kimberlé Williams Crenshaw, born May 5, 1959, is an American civil rights advocate and a scholar of critical race theory. She is a professor at the UCLA School of Law and Columbia Law School, where she specializes in race and gender issues. Crenshaw is known for introducing and developing intersectional theory, the study of how overlapping or intersecting social identities, particularly minority identities, relate to systems and structures of oppression, domination, or discrimination. Her work further expands to include intersectional feminism, which is a subcategory related to intersectional theory. Intersectional feminism examines the overlapping systems of oppression and discrimination that women face due to their ethnicity, sexuality, and economic background. Number 12, Rosa Parks. While Parks may not have been the first African American to challenge the status quo of segregation laws in the South, her quiet yet courageous act of protest in 1955 earned her the nickname Mother of the Freedom Movement. Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks, February 4, 1913, October 24, 2005, was an American activist in the civil rights movement, best known for her pivotal role in the Montgomery bus boycott. The United States Congress has honored her as the First Lady of Civil Rights and the Mother of the Freedom Movement. Number 11, Angela Davis. Angela Yvonne Davis, born January 26, 1944, is an American Marxist and feminist political activist, philosopher, academic, and author. She is Distinguished Professor Emerita of Feminist Studies and History of Consciousness at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Davis was a longtime member of the Communist Party USA, CPUSA, and a founding member of the Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism, CCDS. She was active in movements such as the Occupy movement and the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions campaign. She joined the CPUSA and became involved in the second wave feminist movement and the campaign against the Vietnam War. In 2020, she was listed as the 1971 Woman of the Year in Time magazine's 100 Women of the Year edition. In 2020, she was included on Time's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Number 10, Frida Josephine Baker, née MacDonald, June 3, 1906, April 12, 1975, naturalized as Josephine Baker, was an American-born French dancer, singer, and actress. Her career was centered primarily in Europe, mostly in France. She was the first Black woman to star in a major motion picture, the 1927 French silent film Siren of the Tropics, directed by Mario Nalpas and Henri Etivan. During her early career, Baker was among the most celebrated performers to headline the revues of the Folies Bergère in Paris. Her performance in its 1927 revue, Un Vent de Folie, caused a sensation in the city. Her costume, consisting only of a short skirt of artificial bananas and a beaded necklace, became an iconic image and a symbol both of the Jazz Age and the Roaring Twenties. Baker was celebrated by artists and intellectuals of the era, who variously dubbed her the Black Venus, the Black Pearl, the Bronze Venus, and the Creole Goddess. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, she renounced her U.S. citizenship and became a French national after her marriage to French industrialist Jean Lyon. In 1937, she raised her children in France. Baker aided the French resistance during World War II. After the war, she was awarded the Resistance Medal by the French Committee of National Liberation, the Croix de Guerre by the French military, and was named a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor by General Charles de Gaulle. Baker sang, "I have two loves, my country and Paris." On November 30, 2021, Baker was inducted into the Pantheon in Paris, the first Black woman to receive one of the highest honors in France. As her resting place remains in Monaco Cemetery, a cenotaph was installed in Vault 13 of the crypt in the Pantheon. Number 9, Daisy Bates, a civil rights hero. Daisy Bates was a complex, unconventional, and largely forgotten heroine of the civil rights movement who led the charge to desegregate the all-white Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, in 1957. Number 8, Addie Mae Collins, age 14, Cynthia Wesley, age 14, Carol Robertson, age 14, and Carol Denise McNair, age 11. These were their ages at the time of death, affectionately called Four Little Girls. The 16th Street Baptist Church bombing was a terrorist bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama on September 15, 1963. The bombing was committed by a white supremacist terrorist group. 4 members of a local Ku Klux Klan, KKK, chapter planted 19 sticks of dynamite attached to a timing device beneath the steps located on the east side of the church, described by Martin Luther King Jr. as one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity. The explosion at the church killed 4 girls and injured between 14 and 22 other people. Number 7. Ruby Nell Bridges, Ruby Nell Bridges Hall. born September 8, 1954, is an American civil rights activist. She was the first African-American child to attend formerly whites-only William Frantz Elementary School in Louisiana during the New Orleans school desegregation crisis on November 14, 1960. She is the subject of a 1964 painting, The Problem We All Live With, by Norman Rockwell. In 1960, when she was 6 years old, her parents responded to a request from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and volunteered her to participate in the integration of the New Orleans school system, even though her father was hesitant. Number 6. Sojourner Truth, Sojourner Truth. Born Isabella Baumfree, c. 1797, November 26, 1883, was an American abolitionist and activist for African American civil rights, women's rights, and alcohol temperance. Truth was born into slavery in Swartkill, New York, but escaped with her infant daughter to freedom in 1826. After going to court to recover her son in 1828, she became the first Black woman to win such a case against a white man. She gave herself the name Sojourner Truth in 1843, after she became convinced that God had called her to leave the city and go into the countryside, testifying to the hope that was in her. Her best-known speech was delivered extemporaneously in 1851 at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio. The speech became widely known during the Civil War by the title, "Ain't I a Woman?" a variation of the original speech that was published in 1863 as being spoken in a stereotypical Black dialect, then more commonly spoken in the South. Sojourner Truth, however, grew up speaking Dutch as her first language. During the Civil War, Truth helped recruit Black troops for the Union Army. After the war, she tried unsuccessfully to secure land grants from the federal government for formerly enslaved people, summarized as the promise of 40 acres and a mule. She continued to fight on behalf of women and African Americans until her death. Number 5. Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Jane McLeod Bethune, née McLeod, July 10, 1875, May 18, 1955, was an American educator, philanthropist, humanitarian, womanist, and civil rights activist. Bethune founded the National Council of Negro Women in 1935, established the organization's flagship journal, Afro-American Women's Journal, and presided for a myriad of African American women's organizations, including the National Association for Colored Women and the National Youth Administration's Negro Division. She started a private school for African American students, which later became Bethune-Cookman University. After working on the presidential campaign for Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1932, she was appointed as a national advisor and worked with Roosevelt to create the Federal Council on Colored Affairs, also known as the Black Cabinet. Honors include the designation of her home in Daytona Beach as a National Historic Landmark and a 1974 statue as the first monument to honor an African American and a woman in a public park in Washington, D.C. She was called the First Lady of Negro America by Ebony magazine in April 1949. Number 4. Betty Shabazz. Betty Shabazz was born Betty Dean Sanders, May 28, 1934 or 1936, June 23, 1997. Is it unclear as to which of these years she was born because she was a foster child? Also known as Betty X, was an American educator and civil rights advocate. She was married to Malcolm X. Shabazz grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where her foster parents largely sheltered her from racism. She attended the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, where she had her first encounters with racism. Unhappy with the situation in Alabama, she moved to New York City, where she became a nurse. It was there that she met Malcolm X and, in 1956, joined the Nation of Islam. The couple married in 1958. Along with her husband, Shabazz left the Nation of Islam in 1964. She witnessed his assassination the following year. Left with the responsibility of raising 6 daughters as a widow, Shabazz pursued higher education and went to work at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York. Following the 1995 arrest of her daughter, Kubila, for allegedly conspiring to murder Louis Farrakhan, Shabazz took in her 10-year-old grandson, Malcolm. In 1997, he set fire to her apartment. Shabazz suffered severe burns and died 3 weeks later as a result of her injuries. Number 3. Coretta Scott King, née Scott, April 27, 1927, January 30, 2006. King played a prominent role in the years after her husband's assassination in 1968, when she took on the leadership of the struggle for racial equality herself and became active in the women's movement. King founded the King Center and sought to make his birthday a national holiday. She finally succeeded when Ronald Reagan signed legislation that established Martin Luther King Jr. Day on November 2, 1983. She later broadened her scope to include both advocacy for LGBTQ rights and opposition to apartheid. King became friends with many politicians before and after Martin's death, including John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Robert F. Kennedy. Her telephone conversation with John F. Kennedy during the 1960 presidential election has been credited by historians for mobilizing African American voters. In August 2005, King suffered a stroke that paralyzed her right side and left her unable to speak. 5 months later, she died of respiratory failure due to complications from ovarian cancer. Her funeral was attended by some 10,000 people, including U.S. Presidents George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, and Jimmy Carter. She was temporarily buried on the grounds of the King Center until being interred next to her husband. She was inducted into the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame and the National Women's Hall of Fame, and was the first African American to lie in state at the Georgia State Capitol. King has been referred to as the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. Number 2. Ida B. Wells-Barnett, 1862 to 1931. Ida B. Wells-Barnett was a prominent journalist, activist, and researcher in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Here are 2 famous quotes from Wells. "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and we lift as we climb." In her lifetime, she battled sexism, racism, and violence. As a skilled writer, Wells-Barnett also used her skills as a journalist to shed light on the conditions of African Americans throughout the South. Ida Bell Wells was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi on July 16, 1862. She was born into slavery during the Civil War. Once the war ended, Wells-Barnett's parents became politically active in Reconstruction-era politics. Her parents instilled in her the importance of education. Wells-Barnett enrolled at Rusk College but was expelled when she started a dispute with the university president. In 1878, Wells-Barnett went to visit her grandmother. While she was there, Wells-Barnett was informed that a yellow fever epidemic had hit her hometown. The disease took both Wells-Barnett's parents and her infant brother. Left to raise her brothers and sister, she took a job as a teacher to keep the family together. Eventually, Wells-Barnett moved her siblings to Memphis, Tennessee. There she continued to work as an educator. In 1884, Wells-Barnett filed a lawsuit against a train car company in Memphis for unfair treatment. She had been thrown off a first-class train, despite having a ticket. Although she won the case on the local level, the ruling was eventually overturned in federal court. After the lynching of one of her friends, Wells-Barnett turned her attention to white mob violence. She became skeptical about the reasons black men were lynched and set out to investigate several cases. She published her findings in a pamphlet and wrote several columns in local newspapers. Her exposé about an 1892 lynching enraged locals who burned her press and drove her from Memphis. After a few months, the threats became so bad she was forced to move to Chicago, Illinois. Wells-Barnett balanced motherhood with her activism. Wells-Barnett traveled internationally, shedding light on lynching to foreign audiences. Abroad, she openly confronted white women in the suffrage movement who ignored lynching. Because of her stance, she was often ridiculed and ostracized by women's suffrage organizations in the United States. Although she was in Niagara Falls for the founding of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, her name is not mentioned as an official founder. Late in her career, Wells-Barnett focused on urban reform in the growing city of Chicago. She died on March 25, 1931. Number 1. Harriet Tubman. I was conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman born Araminta Ross, c. March 1822, March 10, 1913, was an American abolitionist and social activist. After escaping slavery, Tubman made some 13 missions to rescue approximately 70 enslaved people, including her family and friends. using the network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses known collectively as the Underground Railroad. During the American Civil War, she served as an armed scout and spy for the Union Army. In her later years, Tubman was an activist in the movement for women's suffrage. Born into slavery in Dorchester County, Maryland, Tubman was beaten and whipped by enslavers as a child. Early in life, she suffered a traumatic head wound when an irate overseer threw a heavy metal weight, intending to hit another slave, but hit her instead. The injury caused dizziness, pain, and spells of hypersomnia, which occurred throughout her life. After her injury in 1849, Tubman escaped to Philadelphia, only to return to Maryland to rescue her family soon after. Slowly, one group at a time, she brought relatives with her out of the state and eventually guided dozens of other enslaved people to freedom. Tubman, or Moses as she was called, traveled by night and in extreme secrecy, and later said she never lost a passenger. This has been The Awakening. Black Women United. I am your host, Cheri Dani. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and hit the notification bell so you know every time I upload a new video.